When my husband passed away, the world became a hollow place. The sound of his laughter, once echoing through the walls of our modest home, faded into silence. Nights grew longer, colder, and emptier. I would sit at the dining table staring at the empty chair across from me, the chair where he used to read the newspaper while sipping his tea. The grief came like waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes crashing so violently I could hardly breathe. The only thing that kept me from drowning in sorrow was my son. He was my lifeline, my anchor to reality. From the moment he was born, I poured every ounce of my love, patience, and strength into raising him. After my husband's death, that bond grew stronger. It wasn't just mother and son anymore. We became each other's reason to keep moving forward. He was young, ambitious, full of dreams. I had always encouraged him to study hard, work harder, and never forget kindness. He was my pride, my miracle, the one thing I had done right in this world. Seeing him smile, hearing him laugh again, became my only prayer answered. When he finally told me he was in love, my heart warmed. A part of me thought, perhaps life is giving me a second chance to feel like a complete family again. The day he introduced me to his fiancée, I made sure to look my best, wearing a neatly pressed dress and my late husband's favorite brooch. I wanted her to see that she wasn't just meeting his mother, but a woman who had loved, lost, and still carried dignity in her every step. She was beautiful, no doubt, graceful in appearance, polished in mannerisms. At first glance, she seemed perfect for him. Her smile was wide, her words polite, and her hand gently holding my son's arm. I watched the way his eyes lit up when she spoke, the way he looked at her, as if she were the only star in the sky. That alone made me want to welcome her with open arms. That evening, my son invited me to join them for dinner. I remember preparing a small dish of my husband's favorite recipe as a gesture of warmth. I thought perhaps she would appreciate knowing the traditions of our family. As we sat together, the air was filled with the aroma of food and the sound of clinking cutlery. My son was cheerful, speaking about his work, his future, and the dreams they were building together. I smiled, listening quietly, proud of the man he had become. Yet, beneath the pleasant chatter, I caught something: soft laughter, a whisper, a glance exchanged between her and her phone when she thought I wasn't paying attention. And then it happened. In Spanish, she leaned slightly toward her phone and murmured something to a friend, not realizing that my ears and my heart were sharper than she thought. La villa ni siquiera entiende lo que decimos misi rala con esa ropa barata. No puedo creer venga hacia cenar. Translation was unnecessary. I understood every word. The old woman doesn't even understand what we're saying. Look at her in those cheap clothes. I can't believe she came dressed like that to dinner. The words pierced me like a knife. My smile faltered, though I quickly forced it back. My son didn't notice. He was too busy adoring her every gesture. She thought I was deaf to her tongue, that Spanish was her secret curtain to mock me behind. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't even imagine, was that my late husband had once taught me Spanish. He had been a teacher, a lover of languages, and in our younger days, we often whispered sweet nothings in Spanish to each other as a private game. For years, I hadn't spoken it aloud. It was our language, a treasure of memories that now only lived inside me. And now, that sacred bond had been desecrated, used against me by the woman who claimed she loved my son. My heart ached. My hands trembled under the table. I wanted to shout, to cry, to call her out immediately. But then I looked at my son's face. His eyes sparkled with joy, his smile brighter than I had seen in years. He was happy. And I couldn't, no, I wouldn't, ruin his happiness in that moment. So I swallowed the pain. I let her think I was ignorant, a simple old widow too uneducated to understand the venom behind her smile. I nodded politely, spoke kindly, and played the role of the doting mother. But inside, my soul was burning. That night after they left, I sat alone in my bedroom, staring at the faded photograph of my husband. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "If only you were here, you'd protect him from this. You'd see what I see." The house was silent, but my heart was loud, beating with hurt, betrayal, and a seed of something darker, something stronger than grief, revenge. And as I closed my eyes, I made a silent vow I would not confront her yet. No, she would reveal herself slowly to everyone. And when the time was right, when the stage was set, I would not need to raise my voice. My silence and my truth would be louder than her cruelty. That was the night I began watching, listening, and waiting. The first act of betrayal had been committed, but it was only the beginning of the story. Days turned into weeks, and I carried the memory of that cruel dinner like a shard of glass embedded in my chest. Each time I smiled at my son, each time he mentioned her name with love in his voice, I felt the sting again. But I said nothing. I wore the mask of sweetness. I greeted her with warmth when she visited. I offered her tea. I asked about her work and her family. To my son, I was the picture of acceptance, the mother who welcomed his beloved with open arms. To her, I was the harmless, quiet old woman she thought I was. But behind my silence, I was listening, watching, learning. It became clear quickly that her arrogance was not a momentary slip, but a mask she wore as carefully as I wore mine. In front of my son, she was gentle, supportive, full of affection. But when his attention drifted, or when he left the room, her true face would slip. Mira estu otra vez con esa taza fi, she whispered once in Spanish while sipping tea in my kitchen. Look at this drinking again from that ugly cup. The cup, my husband's favorite, the one he had used every morning until his last day. Her eyes slid toward me, sharp and mocking, waiting to see if I had noticed. I smiled back softly, pretending not to understand, pretending not to feel the insult slicing through me. Another time, as my son proudly showed her his childhood photo albums, she leaned close to him and giggled in Spanish. Paris un niño tonto en estas fotos, no pudo creer que fuera tan feo. He looks like such a silly child in these pictures. I can't believe he was so ugly. My heart clenched. My son laughed lightly, brushing it off, not realizing the weight of her words. He thought it was harmless teasing, blinded by love. He couldn't see what I saw, that every word from her mouth was dipped in poison. And still, I said nothing. Instead, I began keeping quiet notes, not written on paper, but etched in memory. Every insult, every cruel glance, every mocking word in Spanish became part of the tapestry I was weaving in silence. I remembered dates, times, the context. I remembered everything. There was power in silence, I realized. Power in letting her believe she was winning. My son, dear as he was, grew defensive whenever I hesitated about her. If I so much as questioned a decision she made, he would soften his voice but harden his stance. Mother, please. He would say, she means well. Don't misunderstand her, misunderstand. If only he knew. Once, when I prepared a family recipe my husband used to adore, she tasted it politely, then leaned toward her phone and whispered in Spanish, Esto sabe comida barata de la calle. This tastes like cheap street food. I watched her chew slowly, her face painted with a smile that fooled my son completely. He kissed her hand, thanked her for trying the meal, and beamed at me with pride. She loved it, Mother, he said. Didn't you? She nodded, her eyes glinting with hidden laughter. I swallowed the bitterness along with my food. But as much as her cruelty hurt me, something deeper pained me even more, my son's blindness. He was intelligent, hardworking, kind, yet when it came to her, he refused to see. He saw love where there was manipulation, sweetness where there was venom. I couldn't blame him entirely. Love has a way of blinding even the sharpest eyes. So I stayed silent. I played my role. I let her believe I was powerless, too old and too ignorant to understand. But silence, when chosen wisely, is not weakness. It is strategy. At night, when the house grew quiet, I sat by my window and spoke softly to the memory of my husband. She mocks me in the language you once taught me, thinking it's her shield. But, my love, you and I both know it's not a shield, it's her undoing. I will not rush this. I will not destroy her with anger. No, I will let her words destroy herself when the time is right. The stars offered no answers, but I felt my husband's presence in the stillness. He had always said, revenge served with dignity is remembered far longer than revenge served with rage. So I waited. And the more I waited, the bolder she became. She started mocking me more openly in Spanish, especially when others who didn't understand the language were present. She ridiculed my clothes, my mannerisms, my old-fashioned values. Once, she even joked in Spanish that she hoped my son wouldn't turn out as dull as his mother when he aged. I felt the fire rise within me, but I pushed it down. Not yet. The more she revealed her cruelty, the more careful I became. I kept my eyes lowered, my tone soft, my presence unobtrusive. I let her believe she was smarter, stronger, untouchable. But inside, I was gathering everything she gave me, every insult, every sneer, every cruel joke, as weapons for the day I would finally, gracefully strike. For now my mask stayed firmly in place. And little did she know, the sweeter I smiled, The closer her downfall crept, the wedding preparations should have been joyous. My son was glowing, carrying a happiness I had not seen in him since his father passed away. His laughter filled the house again, and for his sake, I endured the presence of his fiancée. I told myself that I could bear anything if it meant his joy. But her cruelty grew sharper with every passing day. As the engagement drew near, she visited more often, bringing her parents along. At first, I welcomed them politely. They were well-dressed, refined people who carried themselves with the air of wealth. They smiled warmly at my son, spoke highly of the future, and pretended, at least in his presence, to accept me. But when Spanish words slipped between them, a different truth emerged. No puedo creer que vivas aquí. Hija esta casa es tan pequeña y antiquada. Her mother whispered one afternoon as they toured the house. I can't believe you live here. Daughter, this house is so small and outdated. Her father chuckled softly, replying, al menos pronto tendrán suficiente dinero para mudars, east lugar hul a pobreza. At least soon you'll have enough money to move. This place smells of poverty. They spoke as though I wasn't even standing in the room. As though I were invisible, insignificant, a shadow. My chest tightened, but I stayed silent. My son, oblivious, showed them the garden his father once loved, his voice full of pride. He had no idea they were insulting everything that represented his family, his roots, his childhood memories. The insults did not stop there. At the bridal fitting, when I offered to help with arrangements, she smirked and said in Spanish, No necesito la ayuda de una mujer, que ni siquiera sabe vestirse bien. I don't need the help of a woman who doesn't even know how to dress herself properly. Her friends giggled, covering their mouths as if it softened the sting of the words. I stood frozen, the dress I had helped carry suddenly feeling heavy in my arms. My son looked back, confused at my pale expression. Mother, are you all right? He asked, genuine concern in his eyes. I smiled weakly, nodding. Yes, my dear, just a little tired. How could I tell him the truth when his heart was so invested? How could I rip away the illusion that made him so happy? But the cruelty did not stop at me. It began to creep toward him too. One evening, I overheard her laughing with her friends on the phone. Él es demasiado bueno. Ni siquiera se da cuenta de que lo manejo como quiero. Is tan ingenuo. He's too good. He doesn't even realize I control him however I want. He's so naive. My hands shook as I folded the laundry. The ache in my chest grew unbearable. She wasn't just mocking me anymore. She was mocking him, the son I had raised with every drop of love I had. It was that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, that the breaking point arrived. I thought of my husband. I thought of the language we once shared with tenderness, now used as a weapon of humiliation. I thought of my son, blinded by a love that wasn't real, a love that demeaned everything he was and everything I had given. Tears burned my eyes, but beneath the sorrow, a flame flickered. No, enough. This was no longer about me enduring insults. This was about protecting my son, from deception, from cruelty, from a woman who saw him as a puppet, not a partner. The decision crystallized in me that night like ice forming on glass. I could no longer remain silent. But I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't fight her with anger. That would only make me look bitter, jealous, resentful. She would twist it, manipulate my son further, make me the villain in his eyes. No, my revenge had to be clean, quiet, and undeniable. It had to be the kind that left no room for excuses, no chance for her to escape. And so, I began to prepare. I remembered every insult, every phrase, every cruel whisper she had uttered in Spanish. I committed them to memory like verses from a scripture. I practiced them in the mirror, repeating them softly, making sure each word carried the exact tone she had used. When the moment came, I would not merely tell the truth. I would replay it, word for word, in the very language she thought was her shield. The engagement party would be my stage. Both families would be there, her friends, my son's colleagues, everyone she wished to impress. She had used Spanish as her mask of power, believing it protected her. Soon, that mask would shatter before every pair of eyes watching. And I would not need to raise my voice. My calmness, my dignity, my truth, that would be her downfall. As I stood by my husband's photograph, I whispered softly, I'll protect him, my love. I'll open his eyes, and she will learn that mocking a mother's heart is the gravest mistake of all. The plan was set. The breaking point had come. The sweet revenge was near. The evening of the engagement party arrived. The house was alive with voices, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Elegant decorations adorned the walls, flowers graced the tables, and my son's smile shone brighter than I had ever seen. He moved among the guests with pride, introducing his fiancée to family and friends, his eyes filled with love. I watched from a distance, my heart heavy yet resolute. Tonight would change everything. She was radiant, dressed in a shimmering gown that caught every glimmer of light. Her beauty drew admiration from all, but I had seen the darkness behind that polished mask. She laughed with her friends, whispered to her parents in Spanish, glancing occasionally at me with that same mocking gleam in her eyes. I stayed calm, silent, waiting. The night unfolded smoothly, until the moment came for speeches. My son raised his glass, thanking everyone for coming. He spoke with sincerity about love, commitment, and the future he dreamed of building with her. His words were so pure they almost broke me. But it was that very purity I had to protect. When he finished, guests began urging me to say something. A few words from the mother. Someone called. Yes, yes, the mother must speak. Others echoed. I rose slowly, my hand steady, my heart firm. The room quieted. All eyes turned to me. I began in English, my voice gentle, steady. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It warms my heart to see my son so happy, surrounded by love and hope for the future. I paused, my gaze sweeping the room. My son smiled at me, his eyes soft with affection. His fiancée stood beside him, her hand clutching his arm possessively, her lips curved into a polite smile. And then I shifted. Without warning, I began to speak in flawless Spanish. Dicen que las palabras pueden sanar o destruir. I said, my tone calm, every syllable clear. Pero cuando las palabras se usan para burlarse de alguien en secreto, revelan quién eres en realidad. They say words can heal or destroy. But when words are used to mock someone in secret, they reveal who you truly are. Gasps rippled through the room. Heads turned. Murmurs rose. I watched her face pale, her smile freeze. I continued, still in Spanish, repeating every insult she had ever spoken about me, word for word. La villa ni siquiera entiende lo que decimos, mi rala con esa ropa barata. The old woman doesn't even understand what we're saying. Look at her in those cheap clothes. Guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward her. I went on, my voice unwavering. Esto sabe comida barata de la calle. This tastes like cheap street food. I saw her hands tremble, her breath quicken. My son's face fell, confusion flooding his eyes. I spoke of the times she mocked his childhood photos, the times she called him knave, and claimed she controlled him like a puppet. Every phrase, every word she thought was safe in her secret language, I laid bare before the crowd. And all the while, I never raised my voice. I never wept. I never faltered. My calmness was sharper than any scream. When I finished, the silence in the room was deafening. The weight of truth hung heavy, impossible to ignore. Her parents were frozen, their eyes wide with shock. Her friends avoided her gaze. And my son, my beloved son, looked at her as though he was seeing her for the very first time. The betrayal etched itself across his face. Tears welled in his eyes as he turned toward her. Is this true? He whispered, his voice breaking. She stammered, tried to deny it, but the words caught in her throat. The evidence was too clear, the witnesses too many, the shame too heavy. I remained still, watching, my dignity intact. I had not accused her. I had not cursed her. I had simply repeated her own words. And those words condemned her more than anything I could have invented. The engagement collapsed before it could truly begin. She left in disgrace that night, her once bright reputation shattered. Her parents, red with embarrassment, escorted her away without a word. My son was devastated, his heart bruised, his illusions shattered. He wept in my arms that night, whispering, "How could she? How did I not see it?" I held him tightly, stroking his hair as I used to when he was a child. "Because love blinds us, my son," I murmured. "But sometimes, blindness saves us from seeing too much too soon. And when the truth finally comes, it may hurt, but it also sets us free." In that moment, I was no longer just a grieving widow. I was a mother who had protected her son, who had avenged the dignity of her family, without losing her grace. My revenge had been sweet, not because it destroyed her, but because it revealed the truth with undeniable clarity. I had let her own words betray her, just as she had betrayed me. And as I kissed my son's forehead, I whispered silently to my husband's memory, "It is done, my love. Our son is safe." And she will never forget the day the old widow spoke. The room was quiet now, the guests still shaken by the storm that had passed. But within me, there was peace. The betrayal had been deep, the revenge had been sweet, and the dignity unshaken.